right. Good morning, everyone who's joining. We'll get started in just a second with Dr. Jessica Lautz. So she's going to be going over data, how to use it, using stats. That's the number one thing I think that our clients need right now are numbers to back up what's going on and how you present things to them. So actually, we'll go ahead and get started. So would you like to introduce yourself, let everybody know a little bit about who you are? And I forgot, we just talked about questions. If you've got questions, you can put them in the chat box. You can raise your hand. Keep yourself muted so that we don't hear background noise. We love to see pictures of people, but just make sure whatever is in your background is Zoom appropriate. Without further ado, I'll let you go get started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me today. So I am at NAR in the research.
You got muted somehow. I apologize.
Sorry. Okay. I am Jessica Lautz. I'm in the research group at NAR. I've been here 15 years, which is a long time, and time just flies. And we are working on so many different things to try and help you and help your clients. And I would say the number one thing right now is perhaps cutting through the headlines and the TikTok videos and the reels to honestly get down to what's honestly going on in the real estate environment right now, which is very different than if you just focus on the TikTok videos and things that certainly pop through my headlines that are the real estate market is crashing. We are in the worst real estate market in the world. Well, no, we're not at all. So let's get to the data. I think that the number one thing and the number one takeaway that I would have is that we are here as a resource. You can find us on nar.realtor. You can grab all of the information pretty much for free from our monthly housing stats to our Realtors Confidence Index. And at the bottom of each one of my slides, and I'll hand over my slides after this to Jody to pass along to you all, our citations, and you can grab all of the links and everything for free. So please do use it, share it, put it out there. This is a very different environment than what we have been in for the last 2 years, but I also know that people have really short memories. And so if you have just come into the real estate environment, working in the field, this is different than what it has been for the last 2 years, but it is also very different than if we think about 15 years ago. So I'm going to show you some data that really just gets to that. What we are seeing right now is that days on market are still at an all-time low of just 14 days. Homes are moving very quickly. They still are. It's still a very competitive market for buyers out there today. That being said, there are fewer buyers that can afford this market because of the rise in interest rates and the continual rise in home prices. We're continuing to see home prices rise at a double-digit pace. That's still very steep. In a healthy, traditional market, what we have seen historically is that home prices rise 5% a year, not at a double-digit pace, which we're currently at. So there's a lot of people being priced out of the market. But if we just look at this 14 days on market of homes moving in that quick time period, what we can see is that in 2011, a very different market, homes were moving in about 100 days. So that is quite a different conversation to have with your seller about what the expectations are. 88% of homes today moving in a month, under a month. So that, again, very different expectations than setting that for sellers when we look at this in 2011, when just a quarter of homes were selling in under a month. And those were probably very well-priced homes, very competitively priced in comparison to having a multiple bid situation, which we currently continue to be in. Right now, for the typical home that's listed, they're receiving 3 offers. I think that there's probably a lot of sellers out there who would be very happy to receive 3 offers for a home. Again, this is a nationwide scale here, so this is not local data, but looking at this on a nationwide scale, we can see still a competitive environment. When we look at this at the height, though, we were seeing that nearly 6 offers were being offered. So if we look at this historically, we can see that this is still quite competitive, but it's just not the same environment that we had been in the last 2 years. We do see that about a third of buyers are waiving contingencies, again, speaking to the competitiveness of the environment. But also, I think what's really important here too is to remember that a quarter of buyers are paying all cash. So in that environment, they don't care if their home does appraise or not because they are paying all cash for that home. And I think that's important to keep in mind. That's not the highest share that we have recorded, but it's been bouncing around about a quarter of buyers. What also is important to keep in mind too is that 16% of buyers today are small mom and pop investors or vacation home buyers. I would say there's not a clear definition here anymore because of the proliferation of Airbnb and VRBO services that I like using too. But of course, if we have a substantial portion of the market who is staying in the home for part of the year and then also Airbnb-ing it, do you have a clear definition at that point? Probably not. When the pandemic was raging and this was a really big concern and people were not taking international travel like they are now, we did see that 22% of the market was purchasing vacation homes or were small investors in the market. There was a lot of people who cut spending in other areas of their life and said, oh, well, I'm not going to go on a European vacation, but I would love to buy a vacation property, a cabin that's within driving distance that I can pop off to. And so we are seeing that that was a higher share during the pandemic, the highest that we had recorded since 2015. But now it is tipping more into what we have seen historically. 30% of the buying market are first-time home buyers. This is a smaller share than we have seen historically. This trend line is pretty flat. Honestly, you do see some movement here, but it is pretty flat. Where you do see that 50% of the market are first-time home buyers was back in 2008 and 2010. So if you worked in the market at that point, we do know that there was that first-time home buyer tax credit. There was a lot of inventory out there and people were quite cash strapped from the recession. And so that first-time home buyer tax credit did push a lot of first-time home buyers into the market. We do have a longer timeline on this that is from a different data set. It dates back to 1981. And what we see is that historically a healthy market of first-time home buyers is actually closer to 40%. So it's not 30% on the low end that we are right now. And it's not that 50% mark that's right in the middle. And that would be a much healthier market for first-time home buyers. But of course, they're facing the rise in rents. They're facing student loan debt, both of which are big hurdles to having them save for that down payment. At the same time that they're facing rising home prices and rising interest rates. So it's a very hard environment for first-time home buyers to enter, as well as just the lack of home buying inventory that's out there, especially at that affordable price point. We see, and I think this is one of the more important charts to really cut through that noise that I'm seeing, at least in the reels and the TikToks. And I think that when I get questions from my 81-year-old godmother and I get the same question from my 28-year-old little sister, and they're asking the same thing in a day, I know that we should really start talking about it and probably talking about it a little louder. Right now, we're just seeing that 1% of sales are distressed sales. That is foreclosure, short sales in the environment. And that's with a realtor working with that client who had a distressed sale. Back in 2008, this was a very depressing and very, very different environment where about half of realtors were working with in the last month a distressed sale. So there's a lot of people who have a lot of housing equity that they have earned over the last few years, especially with these double-digit gains in prices. And this really does speak to the lack of distressed sales because of that equity that's earned. If someone personally went through something that was very unfortunate, like a job loss or a death in the family or a divorce, something that may push them into that environment that they could have a distressed sale, it is very, very unlikely. And what likely would happen in that scenario is that they would actually sell that home in a positive environment and then maybe temporarily downsize or move in with family or rent for that temporary time period. We just don't see this in a sort of massive scale. This often goes hand in hand with, oh, well, we're going to go into a recession. So yes, a recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP growth defined by the government as well, and is usually coupled with job losses. In this environment that we currently see right now, we do have 2 negative quarters of GDP growth. That's a fact. But what we don't have are job losses. In fact, for every person who's out there who's looking for a job, there's actually 2 open positions, which is really fueling that great resignation that we hear a lot of right now. So in this environment where you can go and you can talk to a potential employer and then have that offer face off against another offer, we're in a pretty competitive environment for employees right now. So really in a positive environment with wage growth. I want to just kind of give you one slide that if you're getting these questions from potential clients of, are we in this balloon or this bubble right now? Is this going to be something that I should be concerned about if I go and buy a home? I think this slide really does get to it. There's 3 reasons why this is not 2008, why this is not the boom and the bust. The first one is tight lending. This really is a very tight competitive lending environment. It is difficult to secure a loan today. If you go to a mortgage broker, you need to hand over all of the pieces of paper that you possibly can for your financials, and then you need to update it pretty much on a weekly basis. So we know who's getting into this environment has a high income and they have high credit scores and they have very low defaults on their loans. There's no subprime lending. There's no balloon locks loans or no doc loans. I remember personally back in 2005, I earned about $18,000 a year, and I went to a mortgage broker and all my friends were buying homes. And I thought, oh, this is a great idea. I should go buy a home. Everyone's talking about this. I did not work in the housing industry. I did not work at NAR at that time period. I went to a lender and they said, you could qualify for an $850,000 loan. I was making $18,000 a year. I did not move forward with that. That was a horrible plan. And I knew better than to go into that environment and to do that. I also know during that time period that cats were literally being qualified for mortgages. There was someone who was working at the Federal Reserve and their cat was being qualified for a mortgage. So we were in a very, very, very different environment than we are currently. We also know that there is a very low housing inventory. We have been underbuilding in the US for 15 years. Just this morning, housing starts came out. They again were down. We had seen them go up for pretty consistently last year, where builders were building and we were going to get more inventory into the market, which we desperately needed. 2 bad things about this. One, that was very expensive inventory that was not affordable for first-time home buyers, where we really do need inventory. The other one is that a lot of those housing starts were not housing completes. Builders were running into a lot of problems, labor supply issues, actual supply issues, whether it's appliances or paint or anything else that goes into the home, and they could not actually get those homes onto the market. If those homes were in the market, they would sell. Families would happily move into them. So it's a very different environment. The third one is demographics. We have a lot of young adults moving into new homes today, and they want to, and I'm going to show you a chart that really goes into this. But the third one that we do see, or the second one here that we see under demographics, is that people are staying in their homes longer. I really just don't see when we look at older adults today and they say, in the prime of my life as an older senior, I want to move into a senior center, a retirement living center. That's not really what we're seeing today. People want to age in place. They want to hold on to their primary residence as long as they can. And they are, they're healthier and they're living longer and they're doing so. All of this said, because of the rise in interest rates, because of the rise in home prices, yes, we will have slower sales activity in this year and likely in 2023 with this expectation. If we look at 2020 and 2021, those are extremely strong home sales environment. There were a lot of people who moved because they said the pandemic has changed something in my life and I have to make this move. So moving forward, we're looking really at a pre-pandemic pace, not a dip below that. So if you were working in the environment in 2019, it's actually pretty positive still in that environment. It's just that the last 2 years have been really frenzied with this home buying activity. So it is a different environment. It's a different paradigm than what we have seen the past 2 years, but really not dipping much below that 2019 activity. All right, so I want to talk about millennials. Before we go in, I am going to spend a little bit of time here. I know we're tired of hearing about them. I'm a millennial. I get it. It seems like a lot of headlines are directed towards us or about us, but it is important when we talk about the home buying activity that we are seeing today. They're the largest share of home buyers out there. They want to buy homes if they're not in them already. When we see this activity, when we see the US population overall, What I'm showing you on this chart is probably my favorite chart out of all these. The little pandemic babies that were born in the last year are represented in the green. And then we can see the bars getting shorter with the gray because we just don't have that many adults who live past 100 years old. So you can see the bars getting shorter there. Smack dab in the middle of this chart is the millennial generation. You can see just visually here pretty quickly with this blue, it is the biggest generation that we have today, spanning from young 20s all the way up to about 42 years old. Right in the middle of that is the red bar, and that is the median age of a first-time home buyer at the age of 33. Why does that matter? Because just beyond that, what we can see is pretty much the biggest population in the US. They range between 26 and 32. And this bracket of young adults is moving into peak household formation. They are ready to be out on their own. That is one of the reasons why we see this rise in rents, along with underbuilding, is because we have this wave of young adults. What's also important here is they're moving into, I want to buy a home and I'm ready to do that. Doesn't necessarily mean they're mortgage ready, but they are ready to enter into homeownership. What's really important too when we talk about underbuilding is how the median age of repeat buyers has gone up drastically. So when we look at 1981, the median age was 36 years old, and today it's 56 years old. People are living longer, they're working longer, they're feeling confident buying a home later in life. And in doing so, that really is crunching inventory even more. The median age of first-time home buyers has been pretty boring and pretty flat, late 20s to early 30s for the extended period of this data. On this chart, what I am trying to do here, it's pretty messy and I'm going to walk you through it, is to disprove the avocado toast meme that we are all sick of. I am taking the spending, and what I'm looking at here is young millennials today compared to young boomers when they were their age. So the whole idea of, well, when I was your age, I didn't spend this much money on avocado toast. Well, it turns out you did. Maybe not avocado toast, but something else. When we look at this, what we see is that the amount that's spent on housing for young adults today is definitely where cash is going. That is where their income is going. 35% of young millennials spending 35% of their income on housing in comparison to just 29% for younger boomers. What's also important here, transportation has actually declined. We do know that people are taking rideshare services, they're taking public transportation, and they're not actually driving as much. So they're not spending as much on cars today as we did see for younger boomers at the exact same age. More is being spent for this young millennial generation on education and on housing. Those are the two big ones, but less actually on food away from home. So there we go. The other one that I want to try and disprove here as well is the idea that living at home first is necessarily a bad idea. We are seeing that the highest share of young adults, 25 to 34, moved home during the pandemic. We can see it's topping nearly 18% during the peak. When we look at this data since the 1960s, that is a very high share in comparison. But what we have seen is actually this has become a really good advantageous situation for young adults. For 21% of first-time home buyers, their prior living arrangement was actually living with parents or friends or family, in comparison to in the 1990s, where it was just 12% of young adults doing that. So it does really show that these young adults are being pretty smart and savvy. What I would say is we did a survey on this of members, and we found that one of the big stressors that you all have is working with parents as well, because we have seen for first-time home buyers that nearly a third of first-time home buyers have down payment assistance from mom or dad. So actually giving a generational transfer of wealth to their child to enter into homeownership. And then we also see this 21% moving from mom and dad's house. So what that indicates is that this becomes a very big financial situation for the parents as well. And they are very involved in this transaction in a way that traditionally they haven't been. So getting advice from HGTV and Instagram and such, but also getting advice from mom and dad. So I'm sorry about that. That's probably not going away anytime soon looking at this data, but it definitely is something that's happening. One of the things that I would throw out there is that we also hear a lot about how young buyers don't want to make compromises. They are. And nearly all are making compromises somewhere along the way, nearly all buyers, regardless of generation. So whether that's the location or the price, the condition of the home, something has to give. We do see for 1 in 5 millennials and Gen Xers, they are making compromises on that condition of the home. So this is something that they are willing to compromise on, and perhaps it's DIYing or hiring a contractor later on, but they are willing to actually buy a fixer-upper. We did see for 11% of millennial buyers that they actually purposely bought something that they can customize themselves and actually fix up. So an older home that they can fix up. One of the reports that we have done on this is actually remodeling impact. This could be a pretty interesting touch point for anyone that you have worked with recently. But I think it's also interesting as a report if you are working with potential clients and saying, oh, no, this is something that you could actually take care of and fix up, and it really wouldn't be that big of a project if you needed to undertake it. We look at 2 different aspects of remodeling. So one is the cost recovery on project, and the other one is the joy score. So this is just the cost recovery on basic projects that you may do within a home. In the report, we go into detail of what those projects are. We also look at a lot more detail of how the homeowners are happy with taking on these projects after they are done, and how they find more enjoyment in their home and such. But just looking at the cost recovery here, so just the headline figures of this: hardwood flooring, new wood flooring, insulation upgrades, those you're really going to get all of your money returned on. The second aspect here is the joy score. This is on a scale of 1 to 10. And what we found is that people have a lot of joy. They want to be in their home after they do these upgrades, and they're really happy with them after they take them on. So more projects here because some of these are DIY projects, not traditional projects that you may hire someone for.
We got a couple questions if you want to get to those real quick.
Yeah.
The first one is just, these are national numbers. Is that correct? Which is correct?
Yep. Okay. These are all national numbers.
And then, do you find, or do the studies show that younger generations, still value homeownership as much as previous generations? They heard ownership is less of a priority because of different lifestyles, and choices and those types of things.
Yeah, definitely. So we used to do a survey actually every single month on this, and we phased it out. And the reason why is because there's actually a lot of survey data on this from Fannie Mae and the Federal Reserve. Yes, all generations do want to own homes. They do find it's the American dream. We did, I guess, an update on that survey this spring, and we continue to see that homeownership is the American dream. Affordability is really the key. A lot of people are feeling pushed out of this home buying market. A lot of people are even feeling pushed out of the rental market because rents have gone up so drastically. We do continue to see that the biggest generation of home buyers are millennials, and soon it will overtake as the majority of home buyers will be millennials. That's just a matter of years, honestly. We're already seeing it, I think, at 43% of all home buyers are millennials, and it's been creeping up every year. We've done that survey, I think, for 8 years now. The other thing that we're seeing too is that 2% of home buyers are Gen Zers. So really young adults who are entering into homeownership, they probably do, we don't have enough data to dig into it, but they probably do have family help to enter homeownership as an 18-year-old, I would assume, but I don't know, maybe there's a lot of really smart techie kids and they could do it by themselves. I'm not sure. Hopefully that answers that. Is there anything else before I continue on?
Any questions before she keeps going? All right. We got a clap, which means they like where we're headed. So
okay, rock on.
Thank you.
Yeah, totally. So I'm going to switch gears here quite a bit, but still, I think this could be applicable to young adults. It could be applicable to first-time home buyers. We did a survey in June of this last year, and what we found is that half of members had worked with a buyer who had a hard time getting a loan that was accepted by sellers. And maybe that's a FHA loan, VA loan, USDA loan, one of these loan products, because all cash is king. Conventional financing is queen, I guess. I would still say queen's better as a woman, but regardless, we are seeing that really those are the types of offers that really were being accepted while the others were being overlooked. This is a slightly less competitive market. It's still a competitive market, but it's a slightly less competitive market that we had seen during the frenzied period where we had a dozen people offering a contract and a line out the door, and you could see the home for 15 minutes. It's not the same environment that we had seen. Because it's slightly less competitive, this might be an opportunity to reach out to past clients who had those types of loan products. Maybe they can't scrape together that down payment because of their student loan debt or because of their high rent, but they're a high income earner at the end of the day, and they can absolutely afford that mortgage payment once they're into the home. This could be an opportunity to reach out to those high income earners with the low down payments. Certainly have fallen into that bucket during different parts of my life as well, but this could be the opportunity. One of those big things that's out there is just a misconception about what a down payment is. So if you don't have those particular clients, maybe reaching out to those potential first-time buyers this way is also a good way. We know from our survey data that 35% of consumers think you need 16 to 20% down for a down payment. 10% think that you need more than 20% down. Certainly PMI could play a factor for some folks, but I know that in some mortgage brokers cases, they may even waive that. So this also another touch point, talk to folks out there, have that Rolodex of mortgage brokers ready to point those first-time home buyers to. The typical down payment for first-time home buyers, just 6 to 7%. So it's nowhere near.
Yeah.
Oh, are there questions? It's nowhere near what I guess folks think the typical down payment is. For even repeat buyers, the typical down payment was just 17% last year. So not even hitting that 20%. All right. I want to go through just 3 demographic changes that I think are pretty interesting. The first one is looking at multi-generational buying. At the very beginning of the pandemic, we saw it go up to 15%. So 1 in 6 home buyers purchasing a multi-generational home. It's back down to 11% right now. We had seen at the very beginning of the pandemic, the number one reason for this was to bring elderly parents into the home. So perhaps keeping them safe from COVID, but also looking on the flip side, a lot of schools were on Zoom, a lot of daycares were shut. So having an extra set of hands could be really helpful for for elderly parents for caretaking, but also for kids for caretaking. So that caretaking going both directions there. There is a baby bust in this country. We do have birth rates towards a 100-year low. For women in their 30s, it did tick up last year, but I just want to show you how this is reflected in home buyers activity overall. Back in 1985, 58% of home buyers had a kid under the age of 18. Today, it's 31%. That is a drastic drop. There's a couple of reasons behind that. We see more repeat buyers. The repeat buyers are in their 50s. So maybe their kids are grown up, they're at college already, and so they're not necessarily going to have a kid under the age of 18 in their house. The other reason, of course, is first-time home buyers are low, and those may be a segment that could have a kid in tow if they are going to have one. This impacts 3 different ways why we're seeing this impacting home buyer activity, though. One is the location of the home. Suddenly we are seeing a rise in the importance of dog barks. We're seeing a rise there in the data. It's just data. We do have reports on that if that's something that interests you, but I know that's a softer topic. We also see a drop in the importance of schools because people don't have a kid under the age of 18, so it's not necessarily top of mind for them. We also know that this is going to influence the size of the home. So suddenly the home office is taking importance over the kid's bedroom because this is a child-free home. And then the third one, of course, is the number of moves. So if you have a growing family, you suddenly have to move to accommodate the extra child or twins or so on, and you need more bedrooms. And then again, the downsizing. So that move, both of those moves being off the table for that family. The next demographic change here is the drop in marriage rates. We did see that back in the 1960s, 70% of American adults were married, and today just half of American adults are married. We are seeing that this is also reflected in homebuyer activity. So back in the 1980s, 75% of first-time homebuyers were married. Today it's just half. Some important points here. We are seeing a rise in unmarried couples. So they're out there in the market. Maybe they get married later, maybe not. We are also seeing a rise in roommates purchasing homes together. So For first-time buyers a little bit, but also for elderly seniors. So looking at the silent generation for older boomers, companionship, affordability, all of those key factors playing a big role there. I'm saving the best for last, and that's our single female buyer segment. We are seeing it now at 20% of first-time home buyers. These women are rocking it. Truly, they are cutting spending in other areas of their life. They're making financial sacrifices. They're purchasing homes on a smaller household income than their male counterparts. And I think they're really impressive. They understand the value of homeownership. They understand the financial wealth that can be gained in homeownership, and they're out there purchasing homes. So definitely a segment to watch. So I'm going to give you 2 more data slides, and that's just how the agent is playing a role in all of this here. We are seeing that for the buyer side, that 87% of buyers are using agents today. The segments that I talked about where there is growth, millennials, single women, they're using agents at higher rates than anyone else. So these are buyer types to watch for sure. We are seeing that buyers absolutely, they want help getting into that right home, but they also need help with negotiation. They need help understanding the faults and features of the home, understanding every step in the process. That's what they're really relying on you for. On the seller side, on the flip side of that, we are seeing that 90% of sellers are using an agent. We ask a follow-up question. There's, of course, tons of business models out there. And we ask, do you want someone who lists on the MLS, provides an ad hoc pick list of services, does a broad range of services? And what we see is that the majority of sellers are using someone who does a full service, uses a full service agent, and really helps them with every aspect of that sale. Whether that's telling me, how in the world do I fix up my home for sale? I've lived in it for a decade. I don't know. I know there's things that are broken. What do I need to do? All the way to the closing table, really, and everything in between. So pricing that home competitively, selling, marketing that home, and really getting that qualified buyer. That's really what sellers want at the end of the day. FSBOs for sale by owner, they're at an all-time low. It's at 7% today. We do have a chapter on this in our profile of home buyers and sellers, that does go into the difference in both selling price, but also the types of properties as well. So if that's a segment that you guys are targeting, there's certainly data on that as well, and the challenges that they hold. So if you reach out to them, you can say, are you having difficulty with this aspect? Because it's probably true that they are. And we also have data on iBuyers. It is less than 1% of sellers who go on to purchase another home. There, of course, are iBuyers out there who may choose that selling method, but it is less than 1% of sellers who go on to buy another home. All right. That is all I have for you for comments, but yes, I will send my slides over after this presentation. I'm happy to share them and happy to answer any other questions that you may have, but I would encourage you to follow us on our social media if you're not already, because we have a ton of information that we're putting out on a daily basis.
Thank you. There's a lot of information. Does anybody have questions at the moment? Hi, Pat.
Hi.
Go ahead and ask your question.
Doctor, I've been watching you since you joined. You've been a great addition. I've watched your career grow, and you're all over the media and this is just unbelievable what you put together here. Unbelievable. Now, question, with it's all 50 states, do you do surveys in each state? And if so, how are these, is it different surveys for different areas of stats?
Yes. Thank you. That's a very nice compliment, by the way. So we honestly, we do like 300 surveys here at NAR a year. So if you get a survey from us, I'm sorry, you absolutely will, if you haven't already, unless you're on like the no-fly list and we don't send you one because you've asked us not to. But we survey our members a lot. Generally, the survey goes out to about 50,000 members, but some of them, a lot of the data from this survey was from the profile of home buyers and sellers. And we send that out to recent home buyers on a nationwide scale. So we're collecting actually the latest data right now that will report out in November at this point.
Okay, just on a side note, I represented a lot of single female head of households. And back then, the loan officers used to say they're better with their credit report, they're better at handling money. And the fella, you know, he can't even pay his bill on time, let alone save any money. So thank you. Keep up the great work. You're phenomenal addition to NAR. Yeah.
There's another question. Do you see a surge in inventory in the coming months due to the changing market?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a really good question. So I have to say everything in perspective again. So in January of this year, we had the lowest inventory since 1999 in the marketplace, the lowest inventory. And that's when we first started collecting that data point was 1999. So yes, we're seeing more inventory. Is it a surge? No. A balanced market between balanced equilibrium between buyers and sellers out there so that we had equal playing field between both those sets of folks would be about 6 months of inventory. Right now, we have about 2.5, 3 months of inventory. It's been bouncing around there. So we're still low. We are seeing more inventory come into the marketplace and slightly fewer buyers, but we're not at an equilibrium yet. We don't expect that we're suddenly going to have this huge glut of inventory coming in. And I think one of the things to keep in mind too is for a lot of owners out there, they refied their property. And if you refied your property and you happily are sitting at 2.5, 2.25 of a rate, I just don't expect that inventory to come into the marketplace anytime soon, unless something really big in their personal life changes, like a big job around the country or, you know, a change in their family situation, then they're going to put their home on the market.
Did that answer the question, Helen? That was Helen.
Sorry, yes, absolutely. I actually have another question, if you don't mind. I'm curious if you see any kind of like maybe change in demand because of the job. You know, there are a lot of companies having hiring freezes in our area right now. Would you see any kind of like a change in demand?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think jobs go hand in hand with housing demand. So people have to feel secure and a mortgage lender has to feel like their buyer is secure with their job. So yes, if there are in your area hiring freezes or layoffs, then that could absolutely impact demand. But right now, I would say the big factors impacting demand, at least on a national scale, are that rise in rates and the continual rise in home prices. It is absolutely pushing buyers out of the market who really just can't afford this market at this point. For a home that is $300,000, a quite affordable first-time buyer home, it really does push the mortgage payment from the beginning of the year to now $500 more. For a $400,000 home, you're looking at an $800 gain. So any of those continual gains, of course, the recent drop in rates could be slightly helpful for buyers, but they may already be out of the market at this point.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other questions? Yep, Pat.
Oh. Pat, I think you're muted.
Okay, I'm back, doctor. Thank you.
Okay.
You're the Jody of NAR now. Jody's wonderful. You're wonderful. I'm hearing the term soft landing all over the internet now about this housing market, which is fairly new to me, that term. But how do you see this market changing through the winter into next year? And I'll let you answer online.
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing a contraction in activity. We're already seeing that buyers have moved back into the rental market. And then, of course, now we have rental bidding wars, which is insane to me to think that we would be in that environment. I do think that just because of pure demographics, if nothing else, we're going to start seeing these higher income earning millennials are going to say, you know what, 5% is what I'm going to get for a rate. It's not going to be in the 3s. And we're going to start seeing people coming back into the market. But I do think it's going to take a little bit of time. I also think inflation is part of that equation too, because we know that people are paying more at the gas pump, they're paying more at the grocery store. So they have to feel more financially secure and comfortable. And we're starting to see that tick downwards. And that's certainly positive for the home buying market for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Nobody has anything? Well, what I will say then is on September 8th, Dr. Jessica Lautz and Dave Campagna will be with us, and she will give kind of the national overview of what's going on with the market specifically. And then Dave will give his, there he is. Dave will give his local update just like he normally does. So you can go to the SCORE website and register for that. But we have two, like seriously, you guys, the fact that we have Dave and Jessica here with us to present these stats to you guys is pretty phenomenal. Dave, anything to add?
Well, the only thing to add was to the question of where we think we're going for winter, and it's cyclical. The market's always cyclical. You always add inventory during summer, except for last year where we just had a lack of it. So, you know, odds are just because it's the normal pattern, you'll see a reduction in the amount of listings. Now we've seen a reduction in the amount of pendings as well. They're off a lot in comparison to last year. But when you look at inventory levels, I track it every single week, report it once a month. I've already seen us crest as far as maximum number of homes on the market. That was a week of July 20th on single families. We had in a small micro area of our MLS, areas 1 through 19, had 1,167 versus I haven't pulled the numbers. I pull them on Wednesdays. We're at 1,027. Not that big a difference, only 150 off in regards to that. But we're already starting to see where the inventory is starting to be a little bit less in our local marketplace. And that's just typical of the season more than what is the market doing. It's just the market does what it does. People are back to school now. They're all going back to school. You tend to see a little bit less activity during the end of summer into fall and winter. And then, you know, you have your all-time lows in January, just like we do right here locally. So I would expect that you will continue to see inventory fall off, that I would expect to see that you see the pendings fall off with it, because as there's less people selling because they don't want to pull their kids out of school, you've got people that are buying that don't want to pull their kids from one school to the next as well. Jody, you're talking and I see your lips moving, but you're gonna have to unmute unless you want us to read lips.
You know, it's like COVID never happened. You seriously, unmute should be like COVID. We should have COVID bingo. Have you guys heard, or a Zoom bingo? Have you heard of Zoom bingo? Where you write down you're muted. Yeah, I think we should play that one time. But you know, thank you, Dave, for kind of giving that update there of where we're headed for the second or the last half of this year. So. Thank you to Dr. Jessica Lautz, and we'll see you again on September 8th with Dave.
Thank you so much.
All right.